Hello everybody, just gotta bring up the laptop so that I know that everything's running smoothly. How is everybody? So excited. Today's day one. Let's get started. There's my video. Okay. There we go. Just want to make sure I have my laptop up so in case I freeze or anything. My area has been notorious for internet outages this month. Okay, so welcome to day one of Knowledge Bomb. Let me know who you are when you come in, and also make sure you tag your store name. So at, AJ's Vintage Designs, or at your store name. I want to make sure that I'm following all of you. That way, if I'm out in the garage painting and I happen to see that one of you go live, I can jump on and help support you and just be there just for some moral support. And also so that I just want to make sure I'm following everybody that attends these classes. Okay, so people are jumping on. Hello. Hello, Krista. Hello, Kristen. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And like I said, just make sure you put your business name in here, like at Litter to Glitter, so that I know that I'm going through and following everybody. Okay, so just to give you a little housekeeping when it comes to how this class is going to work. Knowledge Bomb November. The great thing is that I've talked to Dixie Belle, and Knowledge Bomb November, this group is always going to be here for you. Now just know when you see Knowledge Bomb October, September, August, those are the same classes. It's just that we keep the group small so that you can stay together, and then this group is always going to be active for you. So if a new product comes out and or if there's an issue or there's a video or information that needs to be brought to you about a product, I can jump into each one of these groups, or I can upload a video to each one of these groups, and you always have it in one location. So just to let you know, you don't have to, hello everybody, is everybody jumping on? You don't have to worry about these videos going away. Let's say you don't use No Paint Gel Stain very often, and you saw this video. 3 months down the road, someone gives you a question about No Paint Gel Stain, and you're like, oh, I don't remember the answer. You'll be able to jump right back into this group at the end of the course. Now, since this is a private group, when you go into where the videos are located at, you're going to go up to Media. It's over to the side, Media, when you're not in the video. Media, and then it opens up another option. It has Album, Videos. Videos is where they're going to be at. But since we're in a private group, each video, they don't show the title. So then you don't know what products I'm covering in each one of the videos. So just to give you a heads up, at the end of this course, at the end of the 12 classes, what I do is I compile a list into one post, and I mark it as an announcement so it stays at the top of the page. It's going to have every product name, and then underneath it, the video that goes with that product. So you don't have to go search for it. You're going to come in this group, and let's say you want a refresher on No Paint Gel Stain. You'll come back into this group. You're going to go to that post. You're going to look for No Paint Gel Stain. Boom, there's the video for it. It's all going to be on one little post in here, all of it together. So I'm making it easy for you guys. So we are going to be covering a lot of the basics, but I also cover tips and tricks, and as far as tools to use, troubleshooting, answering customer questions that you might get on a regular basis. That's what this group is for. Okay, so welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be doing White Lightning today and mud. So I'm going to start off with White Lightning first. Let me move my mud board out of the way. And since I teach 12 classes a month, we don't work on furniture a lot. I do have demo boards all prepped up, so I'm demonstrating the applications, the tools, and that kind of stuff. Ever so often, I just so happen to have a piece that needs that product, and I will show it on a piece. But just know that I can't show every product on a piece of furniture, because that's 12 pieces of furniture, or that's 12 projects that have to plan out. So I've got everything prepped for you. Now, starting off with White Lightning, here is one of the misconceptions. I see a lot of lives where people say White Lightning is such a strong cleaner, and I use it all over my house. You're setting yourself up for a big window of customers coming back to you. This is why. White Lightning is a pre-prep paint cleaner. That means it's a prep cleaner. That means you plan on doing work to that piece. Now, because White Lightning it's TSP based, but it's also very strong. That's what's so great about it. It does such a great job, but it's very strong. So we don't want to be telling our customers that we use it all over our house to clean grease and grime, because you might have someone come back and use it on something that it was way too strong for. And my biggest example is, don't tell our customers to clean your kitchen cabinets with White Lightning. If they don't plan on painting them, you're gonna have them coming back to you with the possibility of it getting deglossed. Let me show you. We're gonna talk about mixing and all that kind of stuff here in a second, but this is what I'm talking about. So I did this little board, and can you already see the haze difference? Okay, get my light in here. See this little line that's right here? See over here is kind of dull, kind of got like a little bit of a haze to it. And over here, it's much shinier. If your customer uses the white lighting, you can see that line right here. This is clean with a normal water, just a plain water and a rag. This was cleaned. This is white lightning. It deglosses. Oh, I'm trying to get it in the light so you can see it. It will degloss your cabinet doors. And sometimes, you could put a demo board up so people can see it. But you can see definitely that line that's right here. It will degloss slightly your piece. So if you have a customer that's just thinking, oh, this is a great cleaner, I'm gonna use it on my kitchen cabinets. They might come back to you and say, I have a white haze on my furniture, or I have the shine is taken off of my cabinets. So we wanna make sure that we're informing our customers that this is a cleaner for pre-paint prep or pre-work. You're gonna be doing something to the piece. So that is one of the biggest things that I needed to, make you notice. And usually in my light, it really shows up. I think I have my lights facing the wrong direction, but you can see that line, glossy, not so glossy. So you don't know if a customer is going to be upset, especially if the darker the piece, the more noticeable it is. So make sure that we are talking about how strong this is and how great it is before we paint. Now, the white lightning is something that your customers, every customer should be buying some white lightning at some point from you. Because if they come into your booth, they come into your shop, first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna be questioning them like what their project is. What are you gonna be doing? How are you going to clean this piece? We need to stress that your paint, your project is only gonna be as successful as the prep you put into it. And I know we keep on saying no prep, but cleaning is mandatory. You have to clean your piece. Now, the reason we say that, we have ours in a granule. This is a big bonus when it comes to resale, is you can tell your customers you're not paying for someone else's water. You're getting the strongest cleaner in a granule based. You're using your own water, so you're not paying for someone else's water. Now this little container, and I can throw in some graphics in here that I did for the units for the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. But this little container here makes 16 of these 32-ounce containers. So you can put together promos, whether it be selling this and throwing a free empty bottle, and these things are like $2 at the dollar store. You can throw in a free bottle with their purchase of white lightning, or now you cannot pre-mix this and sell it as a pre-mix. You can't do that. You have to sell it in your granule form, but your customer can then put it into these spray bottles. Now we say that it's 2 tablespoons per gallon of water. Now, yes, you can mix a bucket of water and you can do it that way. Now, I personally don't like to waste product. So I don't put it in a bucket. You can, there's nothing wrong with that. But just to get the most bang for your buck, and I'm very frugal, I don't want to use 2 tablespoons and then dump that water out in the grass later on down the road or after that project and then waste that product. What I do is 2 tablespoons in a gallon. There's 4 of these in a gallon. So you cut it by 4, so that's half a tablespoon. Now, you only need a half a tablespoon for a 32-ounce container of water. Now, yes, you can mix it stronger. I know people who put 2 tablespoons in their 32-ounce. It's really strong, but they do it. And so it's just the minimum amount. You need to be a half a tablespoon, or you can put a whole tablespoon in if you want to. But I personally do half a tablespoon. I have a designated funnel. See that? White lightning's in there. This is kept in my workspace. I don't want to accidentally use this, wash it, and have it anywhere exposed to food because of how strong this is. So have this designated, maybe even write on it with a Sharpie, white lightning, but I have this and a set of measuring spoons that I keep in my workshop strictly for white lightning. Okay, so I pre-mix mine. That way, my half a tablespoon that I have in here, I don't have to refill this. I go through a lot of cleaner. I refill this maybe every 2 weeks, so look at how far the product is gonna go. So that's the first thing I do is I mix it into a 32-ounce container and just shake it up every time I use it. Second of all, I like to clean using the Scotch-Brite pads. Cut these up into little, you know how big the regular pad is. Cut them up into 4s. Attach it to the top of your empty bottle and then sell your White Lightning. People love freebies. Even this would cost you $0.25, you know, by the time you cut it up and the price you paid for a whole one. So it's very little cost involved, but yet your customers feeling like they're getting all these freebies. So that's an option. But I like to clean with the Scotch-Brite pad. And let me bring this up here real quick. So I like to clean with the Scotch-Brite pad. Okay, we're gonna be using this for the mud, but I need to clean an area of it for me to be using the mud. Okay, so I need to clean this area because I'm gonna be doing mud on it. So basically, all you're doing is spraying it on. You're spraying it on. You're using your green part of your Scotch-Brite pad. I do leave this in a baggie, and it is labeled White Lightning. I don't want people picking this up and using it to clean with. So this is kept in a sandwich baggie that is labeled White Lightning. I use the Scotch-Brite side of it so that I make sure that I'm working up any of that built up grease and grime over time. The Scotch-Brite pad does a great job getting in all, let's see, I'm off the camera, off the, you know, all these ridges. The Scotch-Brite pad will get in there. So I'm gonna clean it. And then after I've cleaned it, I'm going to wipe off that dirty residue. Okay, you're gonna wipe it. And most of you know this already, but we do have some new retailers in here, so we need to make sure that we're teaching our customers the proper way to use, look at how dirty that is, the proper way to use the White Lightning and when to recommend it to customers. Like I said, it's not a general cleaner. It's not a daily cleaner. It's a it's a prep cleaner. Okay, so there we go. Got it all wiped off. Now, this is a must. You have to rinse White Lightning. White Lightning is gonna leave a slight residue, and if you would turn around and let this dry and forget to rinse it, you do take a risk that when someone puts paint on top, that paint is actually adhering to the residue. If that residue ever breaks free, so does your paint. So that could cause you an issue down the road. So it might feel great when you first apply your paint, but if you forgot to rinse off any residue from cleaners, just know that if that residue or that dirt ever decides to break free from that furniture, so does your paint finish. So you need to come back and I spray it with water. I get a clean rag, a new one, because I don't want to be reapplying cleaner or any dirt and grime. So I get a new rag, I spray down my piece. I'm going to rinse it really well, making sure every area has that cleaner wiped off. And then I'm going to let it dry before I paint. Now this is going to dry in a matter of a couple minutes. But so you're going to check your rag. If your rag is still dirty, you need to clean it again. Now you may have a bunch of orange residue that comes off on your rag, and every time you clean, you're like, dang, I can't get it clean. It just keeps showing orange. That is telling you, because the water in the cleaner, that is telling you that your piece is a bleeder and you are gonna need to boss it. Because if you keep cleaning it and it just never seems to be clean, you just keep going over it, you clean and clean and clean, and no matter what you do, you always have a dirty rag, your piece is a bleeder, okay? So that is the importance. So the one thing to remember with the White Lightning is not a daily cleaner, and make sure that we are telling our customers that this is an extremely strong cleaner. It also acts as a deglosser. It is not for daily use or to use on any furniture that you don't plan on doing work with. Now, this will dry in just a couple minutes, but the importance of cleaning is amazing. I mean, if you don't clean, you just open up a whole window of things going wrong with your piece. So with the White Lightning, here's another tip, is clean before you sand. And the reason I say that, even if you know you're gonna be doing sanding, don't skip the step, clean first. And the reason I say that is if there's any grease or there's any oil on your piece and you don't get that off, and then you turn around and you're like, oh, that's okay, I'm gonna be sanding this anyway, it's got some flaws. You take that sandpaper to your piece of furniture with that grease and grime in it, and what you're doing is you're working it into the fibers of the wood. And you don't know if that would, later on when you go back and you clean it after you sanded, if you cleaned it after you sanded, and then you put your paint down, you don't know if you've worked any oils or grease or grime or anything that is going to affect your paint or come through your paint later on. So make sure, if you even know that you're gonna be sanding, clean your piece first, then go and do your sanding, and then you can clean it again. I mean, this is very economical. It's better to be safe than sorry. So Clean, then sand, then clean again if you need to. Okay, so that is just one thing I needed to make sure I say. And I will be looking for questions at the end. I will go through my laptop and scroll through and catch any questions I might miss. Because some of you, if this is a review, you don't want me to slow down for questions. So I will grab the questions at the end. So stick around to the end if you do have questions. Okay, so like I said, also designate a funnel. It makes life a lot easier. And make sure it's labeled White Lightning. Provide your customers with a Scotch-Brite pad or any type of scrubby pad, dollar store scrubby pads. Cut them up into small pieces. They don't need a big one. This, I can clean my whole piece with this. They can rinse it out in the sink. They throw it in a baggie, label it White Lightning, and they can always keep reusing this, but you don't want them using this in their kitchen sink or anywhere near food or on nice furniture that they're scrubbing, and they don't want the White Lightning on there. Okay, so label the bag for sponges. I have a box of baggies out here. I'm constantly labeling hemp oil, butter, White Lightning. I mean, I'm constantly labeling stuff and putting it in baggies. Okay, so now I want to move on to mud. The White Lightning, nothing beats it. I gotta tell you, nothing beats it. Just to give you a heads up, I have used some of like the Simply Green and those kind of things from Home Depot. One, they're not as cost effective because you're paying for water, and it's, you know, we're getting the granules so we can refill when we need to. But the Simply Green, I have cleaned a piece with Simply Green, and just for the fact I was waiting for a shipment from my Dixie Belle to come in, I had Simply Green here. I used it, and then when my White Lightning showed up, I ended up cleaning it again. White Lightning got off, but Simply Green didn't. So just to give you a heads up on that. Okay, so now onto the mud. I use mud a lot for a lot of different uses. And I want to show you the number one use is for filling hardware holes. Now I want to show you, I do my hardware holes different. If you see my lives, you know I do my hardware holes different than most people. I don't use a spatula because you do get some shrinkage. You'll get that sinking in your hardware hole, and then you got to do another coat. I don't do that. And what I did, I filled these holes already. Let me bring you up a little bit. I filled these holes already, and then I just so I could refill them again. So because I don't have any hardware or pieces that need hardware filled right now. So I just re-drilled it out. So I'm gonna refill it again for you. But I wanted you guys to see, okay, this is how I fill my holes. See how, look at, I drilled in there a little bit. I wanted you to show you, I do mine with a solid fill. My holes on my hardware are filled from front all the way through to the back. It's a solid fill. I just used a screwdriver and had to open that up so I could show you. That's a solid fill in there. See that? That's what I'm gonna show you what to do. It's gonna give you the best results as far as what I found. And on top of it, it's a stronger, and you have less chance of having that little sinking, that little slope over your holes and having to refill it again. So my trick is for this, and if you've watched my lives, you know what I'm gonna do. Piping bags. So what I do is I take a sandwich baggie. I'm gonna show you up here first, and then I'm gonna bring the camera down. Ooh, I didn't grab my scissors. Hold on, right here. Okay. I had to grab my scissors. Okay, so I take a sandwich baggie, and I'm going to work with white, just so you can see it really well. Whew. Okay, so you always want to stir up your mud. I just had to open a new container because I have literally almost all the way out of white. So you want to, when you stir up your mud, you're going to get around your edges with your popsicle stick. You're going to scrape it off your edges. If you don't use mud very often, once you've opened this, you should go back in and stir it, you know, like once a week or once every other week, even if you're not using it. Just go in and stir it so it's not drying up along the edges. Once you've opened it, you also have to keep it in the refrigerator. I keep it in my door. You don't want it towards the back of your refrigerator. It gets too cold in the back of the refrigerator. Put it in the door. I have a workshop refrigerator. I keep it in the door. It's gonna keep it fresher longer. But it takes a lot to get them to spoil, so you don't have to fret if you forget one out for a couple weeks. As long as it's not in like in the humidity, it's in a climate controlled area, you're okay, but it is recommended to keep in the refrigerator. So what I do is I take my mud. Here is my piping bag. I'm gonna put some mud. I'm gonna put a little dollop of mud. I'm gonna put it right down in one of these corners. Okay, you put my lid back on because you don't want to leave your lid off of it. You want to keep it fresh. Okay, so then I'm going to get all the air out, and I'm going to zip it shut. Okay, now I'm going to squeeze it down to that corner. You see what I'm doing here, right? And you're going to spin it. That's gonna keep that nice and firm down here, gonna give you more control. But now can you see my little tip here? Yes. You see where I'm going with this? I'm gonna make filling my holes so much easier, but I'm also gonna be able to, I'm gonna show you on this piece I have over here that I'm prepping right now, how I have control over where the mud goes. So I'm just gonna cut a very tiny tip off. So now I've got a piping bag. Let's bring it down here. Okay, this is how I do all of my holes. Let me make sure I'm on camera. Okay, so see this hole right here? You see what I'm gonna do? First thing I need to do is I need to put tape on the back. And that way the mud is not going to seep into my drawer. So I put tape along the back. That's gonna hold that mud into place. Okay, make sure I'm on camera. Okay, now I'm gonna take my little piping bag. I'm gonna keep it twisted so I have lots of pressure in there. See how it's starting to squirt out already? See a little bit of tip? I'm gonna go down into my hole, nice and, there we go. And I'm gonna squeeze, kind of wiggle it around so I'm getting it full. There you go. I'm gonna have it come out of my top like a little ice cream cone. I'm gonna have that little whip top. That way, if there is any sinking, there won't be much because I have a solid fill, but if there's like a little air pocket in there and it might sink a little bit, I'm above the hole and I'm not gonna have to worry about when this dries and I sand it, I'm not gonna have that little divot where I have to go back and touch it up again. I'm all about saving time. Time is money. So fill your hole solid, and that way you're gonna have much stronger fill for your hardware. And I literally had to drill to get back through here. Okay, even like these little tiny scratches here from the hardware, most of us would sand those out, but I have more control of where I put it. So I would let that dry. And I'm not getting mud all over my piece. So I would let that dry, and that little scratch from the hardware, that would fill it in. Okay, now, so that's how I fill my hardware hole. Second, I gotta make sure I can see what you guys are seeing. Okay, I want to show you this first. Hold on. Okay, so this one I did last month for last month's class. Can you see that color? I don't know if you can see that color. There is a big bleed through right here. I don't know if you can see the bleed through, but there is a big bleed through. Let me turn this light off. Maybe that'll help. Okay, see, oh, there, trying to get it right in the light so you guys can see that big bleed through. White is off, there it is right there. See that bleed through? Mud has water in it. And so just know that even though this is a factory finish and it's got a shiny gloss covering on it, since there was a break through the veneer, my wood that's underneath this protective veneer, that wood underneath bled through my mud. And so that is a telltale sign that if there's any damage on your piece, you're gonna be doing some boss just because of the bleed through. Okay, so I did this, I fixed this little divot for last month's class. Then you're gonna go back, and I like to use a 220 grit sandpaper, and you're gonna sand. It's gonna be a little bit harder for me to sand it. I have to give it a little bit more elbow grease because it's been over a month since I put this on there from last month's class. You take a 220 grit sandpaper, and you're going to, you can sand in circles, you can sand with the grain. It's gonna make a mess. But you sand, and then you keep touching it. Now, if I feel a ridge right there. If you feel a ridge, then you're gonna just keep working it. Now, I put a lot of mud on this because we were doing a demo with the plastic spatula. So there we go. Okay, it's nice and smooth. Okay, I'm gonna brush this into my trash can real quick. Hold on, so I don't have it all over. Okay. So you're gonna feel it. If it still feels a little rough, go up to a higher grit sandpaper. Go up to like a 400 grit and very gently smooth it. You can go up to a higher grit to smooth it if you need to. Okay, but so there, you sanded it. I fixed a couple holes that are in here. This is my old hardware. I did that. Now, what I like to do, let me dust that off real quick. What I like to do is, with any place that I do a large amount of mud, I like to seal my mud. And now granted, this I would be using Boss on first because I know it's a bleed through. This little area right here is going to bleed because it already showed me it was gonna bleed. So I know I'm gonna put a little bit of Boss on here. I'm gonna let it dry. But then we're gonna go on to the next step. What I like to do is I like to seal my mud. And here is the reason. Our factory finish, it's nice and shiny, it's not porous. This mud is porous. So when if I'm gonna be painting this piece and I'm gonna be putting on, let's say, hemp oil to seal it, or I'm putting a clear coat on it, the thing is that when we seal it with whatever we seal it with, other than wax isn't gonna make a difference. But any of the other sealers, think about it. We paint over our piece and then we put our sealer on. Let's say it's hemp oil. It's going to soak into that paint and it's gonna stop when it gets to the factory finish. But on the mud, it's gonna soak through the paint and it's gonna continue soaking through to the mud. So you do take a risk of having a slight color difference, or might be able to see if you have a very large area of mud, you might be able to see it because that area is more porous, so it's gonna absorb more of whatever product is put on top. And I'm gonna show you right here. Hopefully you're gonna be able to see it. I did circle it, but sometimes in the light you can't see. But you can see, ignore the little white dot. I had paint on my finger and I put a white dot in there. But you can see a little dark section right here where my finger's on top of. That is because I didn't seal my mud, and there is a slight difference. So if you have a gorgeous big long table that you're doing and you happen to have mud on it, it will be more noticeable on a large table that you have mud underneath because it's absorbing the product a little differently. So what I like to do, and hopefully this is making sense, what I like to do is once I have my mud all sanded the way I want, this I would put Boss, just clear Boss on just these areas right here. I would put clear Boss on this, and then I'd let it dry, and then I come back and I'm gonna do a satin clear coat. Let me pour some onto a little cup here, hold on. So I'm going to put a little bit of satin clear coat. I do this with all of my mud. Let me pour a little bit in here. Okay, I'm just pouring it into a little cup. So I like to use satin clear coat. And what I'm gonna do is I just seal, I don't seal my whole piece. I'm gonna seal over my areas that have the mud. That way, I've sealed it in, it's no longer porous, and now whatever product I put on top of it, anything that's on top of it that's gonna be absorbed, they're all gonna stop at the same playing field. They're all gonna stop at, like right here, we have the factory finish. It's not porous. I now sealed my mud. So now my mud is no longer porous. It has a clear coat barrier on top of it. That way I know whenever I put any products on top of this, it's going to absorb evenly because I've put that barrier on there. Hopefully that makes sense. I've had to redo a large black top of a piece because I had a lot of mud on it, and then I sealed it and they wanted hemp oil because they were gonna be serving food on it. It was kind of like a server buffet. And so they wanted hemp oil on the top. Well, I could see everywhere I had mud because it was slightly different texture and a slightly different color because the hemp oil went through the caviar and stopped at the factory finish. But everywhere I had mud, the hemp oil went through the caviar into the mud and kept soaking into the mud. So it was a different color. I had to redo the entire top of that piece. And so that's when I started doing the clear coat. So the clear coat does help. Whenever you are doing a large area, just take the time, put a little bit of clear coat over your mud and be done, okay? But when this dries, it makes a big difference. Okay. Hopefully does that make sense about the clear coat? I just don't want to do an entire tabletop and then come back and have the customer be able to see the long streaks of areas where I had mud or scratches, that type of thing. So just take the time. After your mud has dried, completely dried, seal it with the satin before you go on to the next steps. That just gives you a smooth surface to deal with. Now, also, when you're allowing dry time, don't rush it with a heat gun. So especially like with the solid fill holes. Okay, the solid fill hole that I just did here, that hardware hole, That solid fill is gonna take longer to dry than those who use a spatula and just wipe the mud over the top. Wiping the mud over the top of a hardware hole is gonna dry a lot faster because you're using a lot less product, but you're also gonna take the chance of getting that little bit of shrinkage. But having the solid fill, I do wait overnight before I sand it. If you sand, you're welcome, Gay. If you sand this too early, let's say you touch it and it feels dry. If you sand too early and you start sanding and you see a tiny spot that might be wet, it might be a little bit darker color, stop sanding. Because if you sand mud before it's dry and you can see that areas are darker, that it's obvious. You can definitely tell if it's still wet. If you start sanding that, it's gonna roll that mud right out, okay? So make sure you're giving proper dry time. If you're using a heat gun, just know that turn it around the other side and heat gun the other side too if you need to, but if you have to rush it along. But I let nature do its course. I don't rush dry times. So a hardware hole like this where I filled it with the piping bag, that I usually always let it sit overnight and it's always dry the next morning. So just let it sit overnight. But I do like the piping bag is like a game changer for me. I am going to bring you over to this piece to show you how easy the piping bag is. Hold on, I'm gonna bring you over here. Okay, this is one of those kind of like trash to treasure pieces that I'm working on. And okay, I took off all of the veneer. Look at how bad this is. But don't worry, I'm fixing it. But let me bring it even closer. Okay, I want you to be able to see. I know I'd be up high, but I'm gonna be moving you back again in just a minute. But there is, see this big crack right here? There's a big crack right here. And I don't wanna splatter, I mean, I'm gonna be covering this with a print, but I want you to see this. So if you have a crack in a piece and you just need to fill in a long crack and you don't wanna get mud everywhere, use your piping bag and I'm gonna squeeze it right into that crack. And I'm gonna, oops, I gotta twist it to get the pressure in there. I untwisted it when I walked over here. I wanna keep it twisted. Okay, so I'm going to just run this down this big crack. It's a long crack. It's not all the way through the piece, so it's not like a structural thing. There you go. See, now I'm able to fix that crack, and it also has a crack along the top. So I'm gonna fix that too. It's rough wood too, so I don't wanna put mud everywhere, make more work for myself or waste product. I wanna have control over where I put my mud. So by doing the little Ziploc baggie here, now the nice thing is too, I can throw this in the refrigerator. I can either put this back in the container to save it till later, which is the preferred thing to do. But let's say you're working on a piece and you know you're gonna be working on a piece tomorrow. You can throw this in the refrigerator. What happens is the little tip will scab over. And then, so tomorrow I would just break off that little scab at the tip and I can still continue to use this. As long as I kept it in the refrigerator, even if I kept it out, it would be okay. It's not gonna spoil. You just break the little scab off the top and you continue to use it. But you have so much control over anywhere where you have I know I have a crack along here someplace. Oh, that's right. Or if you have missing veneer, if you have hardware holes. Okay, so I know I have a little crack right here. And I don't want to put mud everywhere. So I'm just taking that little piping bag, getting down in that crack, and filling it in. So the piping bag does help. And it's raised on the outside just a little bit, so I know if it does shrink, I don't have to worry about any shrinkage. This piece is like gonna be a monster of work. I'm removing all the veneer on it. Okay, so the piping bag, that is a tip. You bring it back over here. We're gonna do some other stuff with mud. Okay. Okay, let me move this out of the way. Now I'm gonna talk to you about tinting mud and other uses for mud. Okay, now I'll set this little baggie off to the side and I will put it in the refrigerator for tomorrow. Okay, let me bring my little tools up here. Now we all know how to do the 3D stencils, but I want to talk about tinting and I also want to talk about texture. You can create texture with mud. Okay, with tinting, I love to tint my mud. You can take out a little bit of mud. Okay, I'm just putting a little mud on the plate. And let's tint it with some Gulf. So you can just add, the more paint you add, the thinner the mud is, which means the less raised it's going to be. So if you want to if you're doing a 3D stencil, you want to use very little paint. We're just tinting it slightly. Ooh, I forgot to stir it. Okay, I'll dump that water off. Haven't used the Gulf for a couple pieces, and that was the water off the top. Let me shake it up. Let me dab that water off real quick because I don't want that water in there. Okay. Forgot to shake it. It's been a while since I've used this. I'm going to put it in my spoon just to be safe. Okay, I'm just going to put a little paint. See, very little paint. And I'm going to stir it into my mud. So you can tint your mud. So let's say you're doing like a wood piece and you don't want to have to put the stencil back on and paint your 3D stencil. You already want your stencil to be a certain color. Now you can't tint it to be like as dark as caviar. You would then use the black, and you can add a little caviar to it. So primarily the white, you can tint it slightly. Like I said, the more paint you add, the more soupy it becomes. The more soupy or thin it is, the less raised it's going to be and the less control you're going to have over it. Okay, so now I've tinted my mud. It's a beautiful little, you can see the white versus the green. It's a beautiful color now. And I'm going to use my stencil. Now when it comes to mud, when you're applying the mud on a stencil, when you're wiping it on, I like to use a rubber spatula. Anytime I'm using mud, I use a rubber spatula. I don't like to use the metal because you take the chance of scratching your piece of furniture. So use the plastic. These little things come off if you want more control. Get them at the dollar store or any grocery store, basically. But when you're applying the mud, sometimes it gets a little bit of suction to it, and you lift up, it could pull the stencil up too. So I like to use an adhesive. There's plenty of brands of adhesives out here, but whenever I use stencils, I use an adhesive. I use Krylon Easy Tack, but people like Elmer's glue spray adhesive. You just spray it on. Spray a little bit on. And then you let it tack up. You don't want to apply it right to your piece. You just want it to be a little bit tacky so it holds onto your paint. This is silk, by the way, in something Cove. This is the silk brand I'm working on right here. Okay, so I'm shaking it off, so now it's just tacky. And I'm going to apply it on here. And like I said, I like to use the adhesive because of the fact that it does pull up when we wipe across it. Sometimes there could be a little bit of suction with the mud and it might pull your stencil up. So I like to use an adhesive. I didn't use very much on this because I don't want to have to clean the stencil. Okay, and now I'm going to put my 3D stencil on. By having that paint mixed with our mud, I'm not going to have to repaint this, I won't have to come back and put the stencil back down and paint it. I already have the color I want. But like I said, the more paint you use, the thinner the mud, the less 3D it's going to be. You don't want it to be too soupy. Okay, so I'm going to apply it on here. I've had retailers in some of the other classes that said that they've only ever used the mud for 3D stencils. They didn't even think about using it for fixing veneers and everything. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I use it almost on every piece for fixing flaws. It works and it sands so much smoother than any wood filler. So if you have a customer that asks about, how strong is it? I actually like it better than the regular wood fillers because it sands smoother. Okay, so now I'm going to pull this off. So now I have a green. I'm going to set that off to the side. You do not want to wash the mud down your drain. So that stencil is going to go into a dish of water, and the water will be thrown out in the driveway. See the green? Let me put the white right next to it so you can just see just how much, just in case the light is picking it up wrong. There we go. Okay, so there's the white up there, and there's the green. So you don't have to paint your 3D stencils. You can tint the mud itself with the white. Now here's another thing that I like to do. And I got to remember to talk about staining when we deal with the mud with staining. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Here's another thing that I like to do. I like to, where'd my chip brush go? Okay, I got a little chip brush here. I like to use the mud also as a form of sea spray. We use sea spray for texture, but we can also use the mud for texture. If you have some flaws on your piece and you want to hide them, you can add texture. I got my tinted, my tinted mud here. You can use it with regular mud, it doesn't matter. I got a chip brush, and it gives the same effect as sea spray. So if you want to age up or add some texture to some corners of your piece to hide some flaws, you can use the mud and just not sand it. Okay? And you can make it, I'll make it really thick over here. You can make as much texture as you want. You can give it that stucco look. Okay, so can you see this texture? See that texture? That's very similar to sea spray. And then there is our 3D stencil. Let me show you one that's already dry. Okay, so I did this. This is daisy. I tinted the daisy and it's over coffee bean. Here's the texture. You can really see the texture. I don't know if you can see it there. See the texture here? That's very similar to mud. And it's very secure, okay? It's very secure. I'd seal this and it'd be good to go. Now, if you've done a stencil and you see there's like little like my spatula marks in here, what you do is after it's completely dried, you would take a high grit sandpaper. I like to use 400, but you can use 220. And you take a sandpaper and you would just go over it gently. If you want that smooth look of your 3D stencil, very gently, go around in circles. So you would sand your stencil. If you want that that kind of like polished, smooth, professional finish, you don't want to do the farmhouse, you would just slightly take your 400 grit sandpaper, or you can use Dixie Belle's sanding sponge. That's 220. These are equivalent to a 220 grit sandpaper, by the way. So you would sand your 3D stencil, and then you would take a paintbrush, a rag or something, and wipe it off. But see the color staying true through the whole thing? Let me find a new little brush to brush it off with. Okay. Okay, let me brush it off. Now, if you wanted to wipe your piece off to get this dust off, just be very gentle that you don't reactivate your mud. You would not spray the mud with water. You would spray your rag with water. So let's say I want to get this dust off here, or if I have something on here I want to get off. You spray your rag, not your piece, because you don't want to get too much water on the mud until it's fully cured. And then you could go around and gently wipe that dust off. There we go. But see, by sanding, I did not affect the color yellow at all. Because I had mixed it, my entire mud was the yellow. Okay, so you would sand it lightly, and then you have a smoother finish. Okay, let's talk about staining real quick. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is staining. That's one of the biggest questions we get. And I'm going to really dive into this when we do the No Pain Gel Stain class. But let me grab my little sample board. Okay. People will say, well, is the mud stainable, paintable? Yes, it is. It is stainable and paintable, especially paintable. But just know, remember we talked about your furniture piece, its surface is different than the mud. So when you decide, if you sand a piece, I filled in a big flaw there with mud. Mud basically, or not mud, stains accentuate whatever's underneath it. So you see how we see all these beautiful grains? And this is actually No Pain Gel Stain over it. But it's the same thing with Voodoo. See, when you wipe it back, you can still see the grains. Well, if you're wiping back, you don't have grains here, that's mud. So just know that if you are using mud on a tabletop and a customer asks you, can I stain over it? Yes, you can, but it is going to still show, it accepts the stain, it doesn't affect the mud whatsoever, Even if I put my clear coat over here, it's still, the stain is going to accentuate the details of the piece. Well, it's going to accentuate the fact that there's mud there, okay? Just want to give you guys heads up. So if you have a customer that has a dining room table and they've got a lot of mud on it and they're telling you, I want it stained, I usually recommend they got their mud, go over their mud with their satin clear coat, and then I personally paint my piece first because I already know they're not going to want to see a bunch of circles like this. Now, if it's just very subtle scratches and lines here and there, it might add character and you'd be okay. But if you have large mudded areas, just know when you put the stain over it, you're going to be able to see it. So what I do is, like I said, I mud it, I sand it nice and smooth, I seal it with a clear coat, and then I let my customers know, and I will show them demos like this. Are you okay with seeing the dark areas where the mud's at? You know, do they want to, it's just how important is it for them to see the grain? Because if it's very important, they want to keep that grain of the wood and they're okay with having the mud marks, then go with it. But if they are okay with not seeing the grains, you can paint your piece first. I do a lot of French linen, drop cloth, sometimes pine cone, it just depends. And then I'll put my stain over that to give them that kind of stained look, but just know they're not going to see wood grain. If they want to see wood grain, you're going to get out the graining tool and end up doing that. But you can use the no paint gel stain and the voodoo gel stain over paint. So if the customer does not want to see their mudded areas because there's just too much mudded areas on a table, they're going to want to paint it first and then put their stain on. And then they're not going to see these grains, but they're also not going to see the mud. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so I'm thinking stencils with the mud. Like I said, I throw them in a dish. I have a casserole dish full of warm water, soapy water. I'll throw it in there, let it soak, rub it with a sponge, and then take it out to dry. And then I throw that water out in my yard. Because of the fact you don't want the mud down your drain, it will clog your drains. I also use chip brushes when dealing with mud because of the fact I don't want to rinse my brushes in the mud, down my drain either. So I don't use my good brushes for mud. Don't forget to use the piping bag. Seriously, I've never had better success with hardware holes than when using this. And the fact that I have to re-drill the holes and work really hard to open those holes back up, it shows you how strong this stuff is. Okay, so I'm gonna look at questions real quick. Okay, let me see. Ooh, my laptop got hot. Since our water has so many chemicals in it, I recommend our customers use bottled water with white lightning. Yes, yeah, especially like people in Arizona, they have a lot of chlorine in their water. I do. I keep bottles of, not Dasani. I just buy generic bottled water, the individual bottles, and I also use that for my spray bottles. I don't ever use faucet water because of the fact that I'm on well water where I'm at, and I have a lot of minerals, and sometimes I get that rust in my water. So I always use bottled water for everything, whether it's my cleaner or it is my spray bottles. I use bottled water. Thanks for reminding me that, Krista. I'm looking for question marks. Okay, no questions. Wonderful. I'm glad you all showed up today. And Friday, I will be doing Boss and Slick Stick, and I'll be also showing the new Gray Boss. That will be on Friday at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Now, just know you guys have a little bit more access to me than most people. So I do answer customer questions all day long. I usually only check my messages 3 times a day, morning, lunch, and evening. And then I always pick those questions that are quick, that I can quickly answer, and then the rest are saved for the evening. But if you have a question, and since you've been in the Knowledge Bomb group or you're in the Knowledge Bomb group, if you put at the first thing on your question, message me directly at AJ's Vintage Designs. But if you put Knowledge Bomb as the first words that you mentioned in the question, I know that I need to answer that right away and that I won't save that for later in the day when I have time. That's one of the benefits because I do get so many questions that come to me, and sometimes they're where I have to go look for links and all this kind of stuff. And I'm okay doing that, but I would rather make sure that those of you that are in my classes that are taking the Knowledge Bomb, every Knowledge Bomb group, I'm doing this for all of them. If you put Knowledge Bomb at the top of that question, I'm going to answer you right away. Now, if I'm painting a piece, it's going to be as soon as I can get away from that piece to answer you. But just know, and don't worry about, it's not an inconvenience whatsoever. I just prefer to, you guys that are taking the time to learn this information and that you're taking the time to be here, I'm going to be there for you when you need me. So you message me, you put knowledge bomb as the first words out of your message, knowledge bomb, and then your question. I know I'm going to answer you right away, and I'm not going to put you off to my evening when I go through most of the questions. So, oh, thank you, Kim. Kim, I'm glad we got you in here. I am so glad that we got you in here. I know you've been trying to get in this class. Okay, so the piping bag, you guys. I'm so glad I just looked at your comment, Kristen. The piping bag. I also forgot to use this. I don't do molds very often at all because I use wood you bend all the time. But if you have molds, you know when the clay from the molds crack. This is actually when I started using the piping bag way back last year. I was using the piping bag to fill the cracks in the molds because I don't like cracked molds. And then also I'm not good at mitering my corners on wood you bend. So when you cut two edges to come together, I'm terrible at cutting a miter. So I cut my two edges to go together. I take the skinny little tip of my miter, my little piping bag. I squeeze mud in my mitered corners and I seal it up. This is also good for if you're working on an antique piece and it has those recessed sides. I go along the recessed areas with the piping bag very thin, just like I'm using caulking, and I fill those in so that when I'm painting, there's no gaps where you can see spaces. I use this for all my caulking on my pieces of furniture too. So the piping bag, and like I said, I'll let it sit in the bag because I've zipped it shut. I will get a little scab at the end. This will dry up. I just break that off and I keep using it. Now this isn't gonna last you like 30 days. So this is like for the rest of this week. This will stay good for me for about a week and I can just keep using it. So the piping bag, as long as you keep it zipped and airtight, good to go. Okay, so I'll go back and later on today, and if you're watching this on the replay, please hit hashtag replay. I need to make sure I'm tracking who else is watching the videos. Dixie Bell wants to know that. So hit hashtag replay if you're on the replay. If you have questions, you can tag me, but just know you have to tag me because otherwise it doesn't tell me there's a new question in here. Or message me directly, okay? Messaging me directly is your quickest chance of getting an answer, and just make sure you mention knowledge bomb so I grab you guys first. You guys are my priority. You're my peeps. Okay, well, love and hugs, everybody. If you are just jumping on, I am Amy, but everybody calls me AJ. That's my name since I've been a little kid is AJ. Of AJ's Vintage Designs, and I'm one of your brand ambassadors, and I'm going to be doing this entire course with you guys. And if you're just jumping on, make sure you go back to the beginning and watch it from the beginning. You're welcome. I appreciate you guys being here. Okay, love and hugs, everybody. I will see you Friday at 12 o'clock, and we'll be talking about slick stick and boss and showing the gray boss as well. Okay, love and hugs, everybody. See you guys Friday.